Get the show on the road. All right, morning. Welcome. We have a quorum. Well, I don't know what quorum is, but we have something along those lines. But we're about to hop onto a river this morning. We'll try and find out what a river does when it hops. Paddle away. So, Trevor, I think you're going to have to kick this one off. It's all your fault. Paddling, rivers, swimming, those sort of strange activities that some people think are a great pastime. Others maybe not so much.
All right. Well, strangely enough, I overly prepared for this session because I just commented on Sally Anderson from New Zealand's Post, who was talking about people who actually hesitate on the decisions that they actually make. And I was talking about an analogy that I took from my long distance marathon canoeing days. For those that don't know, I did 10 doozy marathons, which is the equivalent of the Comrades Marathon, which I know that Ed rates highly in global terms. And I happen to do 10 of those as well. But the analogy that I was talking about is I came out of that with a reputation for being a big river guy or big rapid guy. And Sally was talking about people in business who actually hesitate due to their inner critic, that their inner critic somehow turns around to them and has them either hesitate or second guess or hold back on the decisions that they actually make in business. And I believe I learned very quickly in those days that when you're on the precipice of a rapid, and it is a precipice when you're in a grade 5 rapid, you can't look back, you can't hesitate, you actually have to go. And you actually have to make certain that you're paddling faster than the water is actually going, because that water will take the back of your canoe and will wrap you around a rock in a moment like that. And I think that's also what happens in life and business, is that people tend to take decisions, but the inner critic turns around and says, have you done the right thing? Maybe you should think about a little bit. Well, no, stuff it, man. Once you make a decision, it's a commitment, go for it. And then, if you happen to fall out in the middle of the rapid, man, just chalk that up to experience and make certain that you don't do that the next time. So I hope that's one analogy that comes from the rivers. And I think I wrote a story, maybe Lee, you might have been referring back to that, what I learned from actually paddling in rivers. So there's so many analogies that you can extract from the water. Is that what you were talking about today? Please remind me. What was the topic, Lee? Why did you raise it? What did you want from me?
Well, Lee, he's pointed at you, so you better pick up and take it from there.
Yeah, exactly, Trevor. I mean, I think that's where we, yesterday you started talking about rivers as a, and what was it? Was it decision making, or I can't remember exactly.
Okay, you remind me. Yesterday, what I thought was incredible about rivers is that they found the easiest way to actually get to their end objective. And so, yesterday we were talking about something. I can't remember what you were talking about, and this is the advantage of old age. You don't care that you've forgotten about what you were talking about. It's
just one of the natural laws. As you get older, you forget everything.
Yeah, Old Man River is what they now call me. I think what that has done, it has underlined my approach to simplicity, thinking of things in 1, 2, 3. What is the simplest and quickest way through a solution? And some people might say that a river is like that old Chinese drip torture technique. It just keeps on fighting its way through rocks, or so it can make its way as it wants to go, but it will first and foremost choose the easiest way to get down to its end objective, and that's to flow into the oceans. And applying that to problem solving and that sort of thing is, well, what's the simplest way that a river would approach this? Would it try and hit its head against the rock all the time? No, it doesn't. It goes there, it goes around, over or under. Those are the things that we apply. Well, I apply to solutions as best as I can. And that is the difference between simplicity and complexity in answering life and business type questions. So I think that's perhaps where it came from yesterday. And of course, I feel like I'm actually sitting here paddling in the surf. I'm in the middle of Joburg, in the middle of winter, or in the early part of winter. And this is what I would love about being in the surf if I was down there now.
All right, so Lee, I'm back to you then. You didn't escape that easily, putting you back on the spot.
Thank you. No, thank you. And thanks for, I mean, I think that was great, Trevor, just to get us going. When I was thinking about rivers, I was thinking about the fact that growing up in the middle of Africa, rivers, big rivers especially, are rare. We're a dry country. And so rivers are something that we appreciate, we're awestruck by. And one of the things that, so I have very special memories attached to rivers. And one of them is going fishing with my dad, but with the whole family. So basically he did the fishing. We did the sitting on the rocks and watching, and literally just, and as I say, the whole family, it was, we had, it was with my sisters, and they had young kids at that time, we all did, and they were all running around on the rocks. And I remember there's a bird that you don't get to see too often. It's a completely brown bird with a crest on its top called a hammerkop. And it's called a hammerkop, meaning hammerhead. So it's got that hammerhead. And I actually remember this hammerkop just floating across that river as it was sort of tumbling over these rocks. And so that is a memory that's in my mind. I remember paddling up one of the rivers near the Pilansberg with my family, also on holiday, and I'm like first time paddler, you know, trying to work out which, you know, I'm going more left than right, and so definitely nothing in the league of Trevor. And there was an incident as we were coming in where the strength of the current was being pulled out into the sea, and my kids had to come, you know, paddling up to me and basically pulled me back to the bank. And that just, and then also standing in front of the Victoria Falls, and I've seen it when it's been, you know, just a trickle, and you just see these, you know, just these little streams, basically just, you know, trickling down, and then this torrent of water where you can't even see the falls. There is just this incredible sound and roar as it sprays up, and you just drenched. And then even this last holiday, going on a trail through some hills, and there's a waterfall, and it's just a simple little waterfall coming down probably only 5 meters into a pool, and then going down this little stream, and how it just, you know, you see a little rainbow in it, and it's just, I was struck by how we're drawn to rivers. and how they speak to me of life, because that was one of the lessons my dad taught me, a survival lesson. He said, if you ever get lost in the bush, if you look for where there's green, look for where there's a little bit of patch of bush. And sometimes you can go into, Zimbabwe, and it can be brown land forever. And then you'll see a line of green. And he said, where you see that line, there's water. And we can't survive without water. And so for me, rivers represent life, represent it's the source. To me, it feels like it's the source of life. And yeah, so I think maybe let's leave it there.
Great, thanks, Lee. All right, Laura, how do rivers feature in your life?
Rivers, okay. Oh, wow. What comes to mind when I think of rivers is being a teenager and going on a trip, weekend to go whitewater rafting. And I think it was the Saturday morning, wake up and go whitewater rafting. Well, the river was so strong that the boat flipped over and my shoes got sucked off my feet. I had those real flimsy, like just white, we call them Keds. They're just generic white ones. And they were probably maybe $3 or something at the time. But I didn't have shoes at the whole weekend on a campsite. Not fun. So the only thing that comes to mind right now is how significant something can be, even though it might seem so small. And I think of a quote by the Dalai Lama. If you think you can't make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. So if you think shoes aren't important, think again, and never underestimate the current of a river.
Yeah, incredible power in the water. Amazing power in the water. So, Tabitha, how do rivers feature in your thinking? Philosophize for us.
All right. There are a lot of lessons, to be learned from rivers, they're neutral and they just flow. Rivers like flow and stream in one direction, and a river is not forceful, it does not impose its will on the fish and other life forms within the ecosystem. A river is just nature, as Lee said, it is an expression of the universe. It is not envious of the ocean for having depth and a lot of animals, within the water. It is just content with just being the river, I liken the river to Zen and Taoism, Taoism actually teaches the action of non-doing, and Taoism actually teaches the importance of not forcing anything, it teaches you to actually yield and to be soft, Taoism actually teaches one how to act with peace, how to be one with yourself, and it actually teaches the importance of self-knowledge, Zen and Taoism is actually, it teaches one how to be adaptable, how to improvise, just don't be too narrow, like go about with the wind, and in a sense, that's what the river does, This is important because I think that as humans, we have this proclivity to want to like control everything around us, to control people, to impose our will. And you can't do that with people, because if you do that, they will become like, they will be defensive. I think that's the word, and they will become contemptuous, they will oppose, they'll be rigid, you can't force your will on people. Just don't fight reality. I think that's the thing with the river, rivers are like free flowing, you know. I like this Bruce Lee quote. I'm actually going to quote Bruce Lee, you know, because Bruce Lee had a thing with rivers and water as well, you know. Bruce Lee had this to say, don't get set into one form, adapt and build your own, you know, and let it grow. Be like water, empty your mind, be formless, shapeless like water. Be like water, making its way through cracks. Do not be assertive, but adjust to the object and you shall find a way around it or through it. If nothing within you stays rigid, outward things will disclose themselves. If you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. If you put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. If you put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now, water can flow or it can crash. Be like water, my friend, you know? And I think that's just inspiring, you know? You should just flow. Zen, Taoism, you know? Relax. Go. You are the universe experiencing yourself, you know? Somehow you already know what to do. You don't have to force things or people. And by saying that flow, I don't mean to be passive, you know, because there's a difference between flowing about things and being passive. You know, there's a big difference. When you're passive, you are not doing anything, you know, but when you are flow, you just go about, you just in flow, man. I don't know what to say, you know. So I think my big message for today is just be like water, like Bruce Lee said, you know, because that's the way through life, you know. You don't have to force anything. Be like water, be content, be adaptable. And I think that's just my contribution for today. Thank you, Ivan.
Thanks, Tabitha. I'm not too sure what happens when you put a flame underwater, though. I think, yeah, it changes its nature slightly. But anyway, Ed, running through rivers of sand, probably a slightly different experience than to paddling down rivers.
Yeah, I was confused by what Trevor said yesterday, because he talked about rivers reaching their goal, reaching their objective. And then he talked about the fact that they just go where the sort of path of least resistance is. So they go where fate takes them. So how can going where fate takes them be reaching an objective? That's what I didn't understand. And then I suddenly realized that also he didn't say anything about Oxbow Lakes. Now, I don't know whether you guys have Oxbow Lakes in South Africa, but they're certainly in the UK. And of course, it's where initially the river takes the easiest path and forms a meander. But then it wears away the rock or the earth on one side. And then it cuts part of the river off, and it almost stops that part of itself from achieving its objective if it had one. So I was completely baffled by Trevor. But then, of course, I realized that he would never admit to having metaphor, because he only goes as far as 1, 2, 3. But anyhow, I am going to apply the Chapman variation of the Nell Gambit. Now, the Nell Gambit is to talk about anything you like with no connection whatsoever to the subject we decided to talk about. The Chapman variation is very similar, but there's a tenuous connection to the subject. Now, sometimes when people talk about rivers, I think of the Rivers of Blood speech by a guy called Enoch Powell, who was a conservative politician. And he gave a speech in 1968 against the Labour government's race relations bill they were trying to get through Parliament. And it was an incredibly racist speech. And I looked back on Wikipedia yesterday, and Wikipedia has a different history from what I remember. what I remember is that that speech galvanized people to suddenly realize that we were passive racist in this country and we didn't want to be, and that we were actually taking this journey that would have led us across the River Styx into hell. And then it mobilized people and they reacted, because the speech was all about immigration from the Commonwealth and wanting to ban immigration from the Commonwealth, and particularly the Commonwealth that had Black people in it. So it was a incredibly divisive, hateful speech. And it really did. It was a seminal moment, I think, in the history of UK politics, and it led to a much more inclusive society. We've got a lot more work to do, but it did lead to a more inclusive society. And we took a different journey. We took a journey and we crossed another river, or a metaphorical river. We crossed the same river that Julius Caesar crossed in 49 BC, the Rubicon. And we knew then we were never going back to those dark days of Enoch Powell's speech. So rivers always remind me of that speech. So sorry for the diversion, but it's just how my mind works. And I'm now calling that the Chapman variation of the Nell Gambit.
All right, so we just have to call it the Napman. Yeah.
Now, when Ed talks Gambit, I understand it comes from this fascinating game of chess that I grew up with, because you can see it's only got 3 pieces that I play with, okay?
Okay. Yeah, that wasn't the Queen's Gambit, that was the Nell Gambit. So, okay, so we'll we'll take that one. We'll take that one with a pinch of salt. But yeah, salt doesn't have much to do with rivers either. But yeah, Ed, you may not be aware, but we also had a blood river and a Rubicon in this country. So seems like it's something that goes around. But I'm not a historian, so I haven't got a clue what any of it really means. But the power of rivers, the power of water, I think, you know, to be so, I've got to disagree with Bruce Lee there. I think water is one of the most powerful things around. You know, being passive is not something that water does particularly well. It, you know, it drills holes through rocks, it builds stalactites and stalagmites, it carves canyons and does amazing things, and it brings life, of course. So, you know, rivers do lots of very interesting things, but I certainly wouldn't call them passive. Yes, they do appear to flow gently and seamlessly, but what happens underneath that surface is something completely different. But I did like your statement about, you know, the river's not jealous of the sea. So, you know, I think that that's a nice little what's the word? I don't know. We have to ask the Englishman. I'm just an African. I don't have all these fancy words in my lexicon. So we'll have to leave it at that. So yeah, rivers are incredibly powerful forces of nature. It starts with the drop, ends with a torrent. So where do we go from here, Lee?
I have no idea.
No, but listen, can
Going with the flow.
Can I comment on, you know, just suddenly something had me ask, what does Tabisa's surname mean? And how's it for him to come back and say that it means little crocodile? So no wonder he understands what goes on in a river. But I also put in there, clearly, Tabisa, you've never paddled a river of discontent, because you only talk of rivers that are contented. Man, I've hardly ever paddled in a river that is content, because I've played around in the rapids and in rivers in flood, and they are not something to mess around with. In fact, a content river is not something to mess around with. You know, just as an indication, we used to have to pick up bodies out of the Kanani river. Individuals who thought they could actually go swimming in nice looking pools, but they didn't understand the eddies that were happening at the bottom of those pools. And it was terrible to see families who lived alongside rivers, but they actually didn't understand what actually happened just under the surface. And in many instances, and Lee coming from Zimbabwe, people don't understand that what's lurking underneath those rivers are crocodiles. And tourists tend to forget that. So what looks neat and calm, and there's Ivan as well, and he will highlight the danger of crocodiles in peaceful looking rivers. So they've probably got more stories to tell about that. But little crocodile, I'm starting to get an understanding. This guy has been around throughout the ages. I mean, a crocodile is a dinosaur. And what's on Tabiso's head is the wisdom that has traveled through countless ages. I'm now starting to understand what we're dealing with here in Tabiso's wisdom that comes across to us.
Yeah, Trevor, you remind me of a little story of mine. When I first learned to water ski, it was up on a river in Zambia in Kitwe, and used to get out on the river. So at first, I'd never water skied. I was 19 years old, gone up there to visit some extended family, and they said, well, let's go water skiing. So, oh, great, let's go water skiing. So we get out onto the water there, and they've got 2 motorboats, not just the one. So okay, so how do we do this now? You ski with the front, water motorboat. So you jump into the water, you get up and you ski, and so I said, well, what's the second boat for? So they said, when you fall off, the second boat circles you to keep the crocs and the hippos away.
Yep.
So guess what? I've only fell off once. The second time I got up and I stayed up.
but isn't that funny? My first ever water memory must go back to about being 4 or 5 years old, fishing with my old man on a little lake in between Kitwe and Ndola. I can't remember what the little lake was called, but it was in the bush, and it was just that. Wild animals, chimpanzees, I remember those coming out of it, and the instruction was, do not put your foot over the edge of this boat because you'll be taken out, and you bring that up. And I didn't know Ivan in those days, never knew he was traveling around, but there we were, probably on the same little lake or river in between Kitwe and Ndola in what is now Zambia. Huh?
Yeah, I was just there a generation after you were, but
and look, I don't know where this discussion is going, but I must tell you, I did go and watch that program, Simon Reeves in Cornwall, the most incredible program. And guess what it focused on? It focused on a little unknown town that I've only heard of once before, called Camborne. And it was just incredible to get to understand where Ed Chapman comes from and what he was talking about in trying to create new opportunities in developing a forest in Camborne. It was most fascinating. I'm waiting for series 2 to come on so that I can follow through on that. But I had some interesting times providing Ed with all of the links there yesterday. It was a fascinating program. Now I just want to go to Cornwall. I want to go camping on the coastline. So you've got to go and have a look at that. You might have some of those links that you can repost again.
Well, I just posted a link, and clearly this has all got to do with rivers, so we're keeping the conversation flowing. But, yes. So the thing that I've just posted in there, I saw yesterday, courtesy of BJ, funnily enough. It's quite interesting. So you can buy a plot of land in the Scottish Highlands and get a title. So you can become a lord or a laird or whatever you can. And it's one of the ways they're actually funding national parks up there. And I thought of Ed's Camborne opportunity, and perhaps we should start selling plots of land in Camborne. I don't know if you can get any titles in Cornwall, but
you probably can actually. Just to switch back to rivers. I think the one, and you alluded to it, Ivan, I think the one thing we didn't talk about is when you change the temperature, because I've had the weird experience of being on the Mackenzie River when a great big Arctic lorry drove past at 80 kilometers an hour because it freezes. And if you ever seen ice road truckers, that's the road they drive the lorries along. So if you freeze water, it's a completely different thing. And actually, if you put water in a container and freeze it, it will shatter the container, even if it's a steel container. And it's the same with steam, isn't it? If you heat water up to above 100 degrees, it has tremendous power. And it created the Industrial Revolution. It in fact created, we created in Camborne actually the first road vehicle using steam, a guy called Trelisic. So I just wondered whether there's anything to play around with this thing of in different states, the same thing has different effects. I don't know, it fascinates me, the fact that water, it's different in ice, and you think of the whole of Antarctica is just an ice sheet, and it's the biggest desert in the world, and it's not what you think of a desert as normally. And then you think of steam and the power of steam, and you think how hot steam gets. If you've ever put your hand right near the spout of a kettle where it's actually still steam rather than water vapor, it is really, really hot. So that fascinates me, but I don't know how we talk about it.
Oh, you just did. I think,
in a businessy life metaphor type of context.
There's a great little skit called 201 degrees Fahrenheit, I think. Trevor, was it called? Do you remember that one?
Yeah, try to go back to it.
Yeah, no, look, why not? I think I'm sure we'll find something to talk around that. So the changing states, and then that's not the states in the US, Laura. Those are just boring. We'll stick to changing states and matter. No, I lost Laura completely there. Okay, Laura, when you wake up, we'll tell you what it's all about. So.
A bucket of cold water, Laura.
All right, good.
Let's confirm. So our topic for tomorrow is about changing states.
Yes, why not?
Yeah, I think that's a great title.
Yeah. That doesn't mean going from Iowa to Wisconsin.
That's exactly what I said. Yeah.
I will clarify that in the email, Edward.
Yeah. Just spell it out. Just spell it out, because I know these people from America don't know anything other than 51 things. They can count past 3, but they get to 51 and they stop there. So.
I'm downsizing. I'm streamlining my email, so I might not get it. What was changing states? Matter?
Changing states.
Matter. Got it. I think I know more. There's not there. I don't think there's 51.
So I love this topic because altered states, it's about aliens and
yeah.
Where we're going. Is that where we're going? Huh?
If we talked about altered states, that's the first R-rated movie that I saw on my parents' cable growing up. I could talk about that.
All right, so that should change my state in an instant, Laura.
Another code. We got another code.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. We'll go and be stateless, and we can get you into some kind of state tomorrow. But I've got no idea. But see, have a good one. Cheers, folks.
Bye.
Bye.